For those who grew up using Windows XP, this video is for you. I was surrounded by XP systems in my life, at school and at home, but I've never had the chance to create an XP gaming PC from the ground up. So that's what I'm setting out to do, build the 2003 gaming PC I never had the chance to build as a kid. Let's start our journey with the parts that I've been accumulating over the past month. Starting off, the main chassis that we're going to be building in. I picked up the Antec NSK 3480 for £19, a case that really does give off those perfect early to mid 2000s custom PC vibes. But what parts are we going to be putting in there? Firstly, our mainboard. I managed to pick up this Socket 478 Acer board for £13. The reason I went with this motherboard was because it's essentially a rebranded Foxconn board, meaning all the front I/O and other ports on the board won't be proprietary. And what's going to be delivering our processing power? Well, here you go. A Socket 478 Pentium 4 running at 2.8 GHz for £2.50, which is one of the higher clocked Pentiums on the 478 socket. Our memory, 2 GB of DDR400 RAM, more than enough for our classic retro titles. Now, for gaming, you're going to want a video card, and this is where I give a big shout out to Budget Builds Official for donating this to the channel, the GeForce FX 5200, delivering 128MB of VRAM. You can check out the link in the top right for his review on this card. And not only that, he even sent me an Ethernet card to fix the driver issues I was having with the motherboard Ethernet controller. I did have to replace the stock cooling fan, as it was making a hell of a lot of noise due to a crack in one of the fan fins. Here is a before and after.
When I said an outbolt, I didn't mean an outbolt, it was on the tongue top.
Every retro gaming system needs a sound card. In this case, I have gone with the Sound Blaster Live, a good pairing for a system like this in order to improve our game's sound drastically. And our power supply. I picked up this FSP Group 350W power supply, and the reason I've gone with this unit is because it's 80+ rated, and this is very important for an older system like this. And now, the accessories and other parts that are essential to an old build like this. A DVD drive, floppy drive, an 80GB hard drive, along with the appropriate IDE cables. And I also picked up an I/O shield for the motherboard as it didn't come with one, and unfortunately the CPU cooler had no clips on it, so I grabbed some zip ties to do it the good old fashioned way to attach the cooler securely. Now it's time for us to prepare the motherboard. Firstly, installing the Pentium 4 is easy with the Zero Insertion Force 478 socket. And then our cooler install was rather fiddly with the zip ties, but we got it secured on in the end. Our RAM install was pretty easy, and with 4 slots we do have room to upgrade in the future, up to 4GB, but I'm sure 2GB is going to be perfect for now. Heading over to our case, I'm going to start by installing the power supply into the upper compartment of the case, along with our hard drive, DVD drive and floppy drive. Cable management in this case is pretty tough, with not a lot of room to work with in this area, but I managed to make it work. With our motherboard in, it was time to connect up all the front panel headers and get our power supply connected to the motherboard. And while I was in there, I added a nice and retro blue cold cathode light into the bottom. Next up, the install of our various cards, including the sound card and graphics card. And finally, with some cable management done, our case is finalised, looking spectacularly retro. finalise our Retro XP experience, we're going to be using this Samsung SyncMaster T220, running at a native resolution of 1680 by 1050. Yes, this monitor may have been released in 2007, but this 1050 resolution was similar to what I was using back in the day. And with that, our benchmarks can now take place. Starting off, an absolute classic game from my childhood, Lego Island 2. Running at 1280 by 1024 and highest settings, we pulled off a perfectly playable 35 FPS on average. Next we've got Half-Life 1, which pulled off a perfectly playable 71 FPS on average, with the highest settings and D3D renderer enabled. And of course we had to test the second game in the series with Half-Life 2. Running at our native resolution and lowest settings, we pulled off an alright but not perfect 26 FPS on average. Turning down our resolution would have brought our FPS that tad higher to reach a better performance rating. Now, while this one isn't exactly the most demanding title, I had to try out some classic Doom 95 on this PC, which ran at a perfectly playable 35 FPS for most of the time. Next up, LEGO Racers 2, which ran okay at the 1280 by 1024 medium preset. Scoring an average FPS of 30, it was more than enough to enjoy this game. Before anyone asks, no, Crysis does not work on this PC. Yet again, Crysis has brought another computer to its knees. The experience in CS 1.6 was perfect. Running at the high preset, we achieved an average FPS of 87. The only issue we ran into was the fact that I joined a deathmatch server and, well, didn't know how to play. We did have a go at trying to play The Sims 3, but running at lowest settings and 1024 by 768, we pulled off an average FPS of 14, which really isn't that playable, so The Sims doesn't really run on this system, but I'm not surprised with the age of this game. GTA 3 ran pretty well with an average FPS of 37 at the high preset. While we did experience some frame drops here and there, the overall experience was about what you expect and it was definitely playable. Another game in the GTA franchise with Vice City, which ran perfect at the low preset and achieved an average FPS of 44. Overall, a great experience from this game. Quake 3 Arena, an absolute classic from the early 2000s, running at 1280 by 1024 on the highest preset, we achieved an average FPS of 87, and overall, the experience in this game couldn't have been better. However, when we bring it over to the successor game, Quake 4, running at 480p lowest settings, we achieved an average FPS of 32. While this may sound playable, we did actually experience a lot of stutter when a lot was going on the screen. The only time we really hit that 30 FPS region was when we were not doing anything. Now this next game is going to look rather insignificant to everyone else, but this was the Forza of my day. Driving Speed 2 was a game that I put so many hours into as a child, and, well, you may be able to tell, it doesn't run very well on this system. Running at 480p lowest settings, we achieved an average FPS of 30, but we had many graphical glitches in the game, and overall, it wasn't very enjoyable. Another driving game with Euro Truck Simulator 1, which didn't run very well either. Running at 480p lowest settings, we achieved an average FPS of 8. Very far from playable and not recommended for anyone at all. And to finish us off, some 2D classics, including SimCity 3000, running at 1024 by 768 highest settings, we achieved an average FPS of 129, with no stutters, no slowdowns, the game ran excellent on this hardware. And finally, a classic game that I did used to play back in the day. We weren't able to get any benchmark numbers, but I'm sure you guys can tell that Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 ran excellent on this machine, and it really did bring me back to when I was a child. So here's my unscripted closing statement. This machine was not built to be the most powerful, but it was meant to replicate the childhood experience I had gaming on Pentium 4s, and it did it perfectly. I'm going to keep this system around because it really does remind me of my childhood, and overall I'd recommend you guys doing something similar. It really is fun to just kick back and play some older titles on the appropriate hardware. So, thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed going on this little nostalgia trip with me, and I'll see you in the next one.